My grandmother rolled down the tinted window of her pristine black Lincoln sedan and looked at the peeling paint of the homeless shelter sign, then at me. Sophia, she asked, her voice trembling with confusion. Why aren't you at the Hawthorne house meeting the contractors for the kitchen remodel? I stared back, clutching my freezing 4-year-old daughter's hand, my fingers numb inside my torn gloves. What house, Nana? I asked, my voice barely a whisper against the wind. What contractors? The color drained from her face so fast, I thought she might faint right there in the back seat. 3 days later, I walked into a family gala, and my parents looked like they had seen a ghost. My name is Sophia, and at 29 years old I found myself standing in a soup kitchen line in the middle of a brutal Chicago winter, betrayed by the people who were supposed to protect me. Before I tell you how a single text message on my grandmother's phone exposed a multi-million-dollar lie, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Please hit that like button and subscribe if you have ever had to rebuild your life from absolutely nothing. The wind in Chicago has a name. We call it the hawk. And that morning, the hawk was hunting. It sliced through the thin layers of my thrift store coat and bit into my skin. I pulled Zuri closer to my leg, trying to shield her from the biting gust that whipped around the corner of Safe Haven Shelter. Mommy, my feet hurt. Zuri whimpered, her voice muffled by the scarf I had wrapped around her face 3 times. I know, baby, I whispered, rubbing her small back. Just 10 more minutes. We will get some hot soup, and then we can go inside where it is warm. I kept my head down, pulling my beanie low over my forehead. Shame is a heavy coat to wear, heavier than the winter gear I lacked. I was a medical data analyst. I had a degree. 6 months ago I had a life. Now I was number 42 in line for a bowl of watery vegetable broth. I was terrified of seeing someone I knew from high school, someone who would look at me with pity or worse, judgment. That was when the car appeared. It did not belong here. In a neighborhood of rusted sedans and city buses, the 2024 Lincoln Town Car, gleaming in black lacquer, looked like a spaceship. It moved slowly, tires crunching over the dirty gray slush, searching. My heart hammered against my ribs. I thought it might be a drug dealer or a politician looking for a photo op. But then the car stopped right in front of us. The back door opened, and a pair of pristine leather boots stepped out onto the cracked sidewalk. Then came the mink coat, and finally, the face that commanded respect from everyone on the South Side. Nana Rose. My grandmother stood there, 75 years of iron will wrapped in elegance. She looked at the line of shivering people. She looked at the shelter sign with its missing letters. And then her eyes locked on me. Sophia, she said. It was not a question. It was an accusation. I wanted to run. I wanted to grab Zuri and disappear into the alley. But my feet were frozen to the pavement. Nana, I choked out. She walked toward me, ignoring the slush ruining her Italian boots. She looked at Zuri, whose eyes were wide with fear, and then back at me. Her expression was not one of pity. It was confusion. Deep, terrifying confusion. I just spoke to your mother this morning, Nana Rose said, her voice sharp. Patricia said you were at the house on Hawthorne Street. She sent me a picture of you looking at marble samples for the kitchen island. She said you needed privacy to focus on the renovations. My brain spun. Hawthorne Street. My grandfather's house. The house he had promised me in his will, the one my parents told me had been seized by the city for back taxes 6 months ago. The reason I was on the street was because I had nowhere else to go when my apartment lease ended, and I lost my job in the same week. Nana, I said, tears freezing on my cheeks. I haven't been to Hawthorne Street in 6 months. Mom and Dad said the city took it. I have been here. I have been here since August. The silence that followed was louder than the wind. Nana Rose looked at me, really looked at me. She saw the hollows under my eyes. She saw the duct tape on my boots. She saw the way Zuri was shivering despite my efforts. Get in the car, she ordered. But Nana, I smell like... Get in the car, Sophia. Now. I lifted Zuri up and slid onto the heated leather seats. The warmth hit me like a physical blow, making my frozen fingers throb painfully. The driver, Mr. Henderson, looked at me in the rearview mirror with sadness in his eyes. But he said nothing. He just turned up the heat. "Where are we going, ma'am?" he asked. "The Drake Hotel," Nana Rose said, her voice like flint. "And then to my lawyer's office." As the car pulled away from the shelter, leaving my past life in the rearview mirror, Nana Rose pulled out her phone. Her hand, usually so steady, was shaking slightly. "Look at this," she said, thrusting the screen toward me. It was a text thread with my mother, Patricia. The latest message, sent just 2 hours ago, read, "Mom Sophia is so happy with the renovation. She just picked out the Italian Carrara marble. It is pricey though. She needs another $5,000 to secure the slab today. Can you wire it to the joint account? She is too busy supervising the contractors to come to the phone." Below the text was a photo. It was a photo of a woman from the back, possessing my build, wearing a coat I used to own, pointing at a slab of white marble. I felt bile rise in my throat. "That is not me, Nana," I whispered. "That is Harper. That is Andre's wife wearing my old coat." Nana Rose took the phone back. She stared at the message, and I saw something shift in her eyes. The loving grandmother was gone. The ruthless businesswoman who built a beauty empire from nothing had taken her place. "They told me you were doing well," she said softly, but the anger underneath was volcanic. "They told me you wanted space. They told me you were building a home for my great-granddaughter." She looked at Zuri, who had fallen asleep instantly in the warmth of the seat. "They have been cashing checks in your name for 6 months, Sophia. Renovation costs, contractor fees, furniture. I have sent over $50,000 to help you fix up a house you are not even living in." I sat back against the soft leather, my head spinning. $50,000. While I begged for extra crackers for my daughter's soup. My parents and my brother were not just ignoring my struggle. They were profiting from a ghost version of me. Nana Rose tapped the partition glass. "Mr. Henderson, drive faster." She turned to me, and for the first time she took my hand. Her grip was tight. "Do not call your mother. Do not call your father. And certainly do not call that brother of yours. We are going to find out exactly what is happening in that house on Hawthorne Street. And come Saturday night at my birthday gala, everyone is going to find out exactly who they really are." I looked out the window as the city skyline blurred past. I was no longer just a homeless single mother trying to survive the winter. I was a woman with a mission. And for the first time in 6 months, I wasn't cold anymore. I was burning with rage. The suite at the Drake Hotel was warmer than any place I had been in 6 months, but as I sat on the velvet edge of the king-sized bed, my blood ran cold. Nana Rose placed a sleek silver laptop on the mahogany desk in front of me. Her hands, usually adorned with rings that caught the light, were bare today, as if she had stripped herself down for battle. "Find it," she said simply. "Find out what they have done." I opened the laptop, my fingers trembling slightly as I typed the address that had been etched into my heart since childhood. 42 Hawthorne Street. I expected to see a foreclosure notice or a tax lien. I expected to see a tragedy of bureaucracy. Instead, I saw a 5-star vacation rental. The website loaded with a cheerful animation displaying my grandfather's historic brownstone in high-definition glory. The title of the listing made bile rise in my throat. "The Urban Oasis Historic Luxury in the Heart of Chicago." I scrolled down, my eyes widening with every line. The price was listed at $800 a night, and the calendar was booked solid for the next 3 months. $800. That was more than I had made in a month working odd jobs before I lost everything. I did the math in my head. They were pulling in nearly $24,000 a month from a house that legally belonged to me. Then I saw the host profile. It was a picture of my brother Andre and his wife Harper. They were clinking champagne glasses, their teeth blindingly white, exuding the kind of casual wealth that makes you hate someone instantly. Beneath their photo, the bio read, "Andre and Harper, real estate power couple. We are passionate about preserving our family legacy and sharing our historic home with discerning travelers. Family legacy. They were selling my grandfather's legacy by the night to tourists while his granddaughter slept in a shelter. I clicked on the reviews hoping to find complaints, hoping to find cracks in their facade. Instead, I found praise that cut deeper than any insult. One review from a woman named Karen read Harper is an absolute delight. She personally welcomed us and gave us a tour, telling us touching stories about how her husband inherited this home from his grandfather and how they have worked so hard to restore it. A true gem. Another review said the hosts were so gracious. It is rare to see a young couple so dedicated to maintaining their property. Worth every penny. They had erased me. In their version of the story, I did not exist. There was no sister who had cared for Grandpa in his final years. There was no rightful heir. There was only Andre and Harper, the golden couple. Nana Rose was reading over my shoulder, her breath hitching as she read the lies. "Call her," Nana whispered, her voice like cracking ice. "Call your mother right now. Put it on speaker." I pulled out my cracked phone. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped it. I dialed the number I knew by heart, the number that had sent me to voicemail for months. This time it rang twice before she picked up. Her voice was frantic, breathless. "Sophia, I told you not to call me during the day. I am busy with Dad. He is having a bad back day." I looked at Nana Rose. She signaled for me to speak. "Mom," I said, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. "I was just wondering if the repairs were done. It is getting really cold at the shelter, Mom. Zuri is sick. Can we please just come home? I can sleep on the floor. I just need a roof." There was a pause. I could hear clinking in the background, the sound of silverware on china. I could hear laughter. Then my mother's voice dropped to a whisper filled with fake sympathy. "Oh, honey, I wish you could. You know I do. But the plumbing is a disaster. The contractor said the pipes burst in the basement. There is sewage everywhere. It is toxic, Sophia. I cannot let a child breathe that air. You understand, right? I am protecting you. Just stay with your friend for a few more weeks. We will figure something out." Sewage. She was lying about sewage while sitting in a warm restaurant likely paid for with the money from my house. Nana Rose's eyes were closed, a single tear tracking through her foundation. She was not crying from sadness. She was crying from the realization that her daughter was a monster. "I promise I will send you a little something on Friday," my mother continued, her voice rushing now. "I have to go, Sophia. Dad is calling me. Love you." The line went dead. The silence in the hotel room was heavy, suffocating. Nana Rose walked over to the window and looked out at the frozen lake. She did not say a word, but the set of her jaw told me everything. The war had begun. I turned back to the laptop. I needed more. I needed to see exactly what they were doing inside my home. I opened Instagram and searched for Harper's handle. Her profile was public, of course. It was a shrine to her vanity. The most recent story had been posted 20 minutes ago. The location tag was 42 Hawthorne Street. The caption read, "Cozy winter vibe. Nothing beats a real fire and good wine. Had blessed #renovation life." I clicked on the photo to expand it. Harper was posing in front of the living room fireplace wearing a white cashmere sweater holding a glass of red wine. The fire was roaring behind her, casting a warm glow on her perfect skin, but my eyes did not linger on her face. I looked past her into the fire. I looked at what was burning. It wasn't wood. Curling in the flames, I saw a leather cover. I saw gold leaf lettering turning to ash. I zoomed in until the pixels blurred, but I didn't need high resolution to know what I was seeing. It was a book. Specifically, it was the first edition of The Count of Monte Cristo that Grandpa had given me for my 16th birthday. He had spent years tracking it down because he knew it was my favorite story. He had written a dedication on the inside cover, "To Sophia, may you always find your justice." Harper was burning my books. She was using my most failed treasures as kindling for her aesthetic photo op. I felt a scream building in my chest, a primal sound of grief and rage that threatened to shatter the hotel windows. She wasn't just stealing my house. She was burning my memories. She was incinerating the only pieces of my grandfather I had left, just to get the lighting right for a selfie. I looked at Nana Rose, pointing at the screen. My voice was gone, replaced by a low, guttural growl. Look! Look at what she is doing! Nana Rose leaned in, squinting at the screen. When she realized what she was seeing, her hand flew to her mouth. That is Arthur's book, she gasped. That is the book he read to you every Sunday. Yes, I said, the tears finally spilling over hot and fast. She is burning him, Nana. She is burning everything. I slammed the laptop shut. The sound echoed like a gunshot. I stood up, wiping the tears from my face with the back of my hand. The sadness was gone. The fear was gone. In their place was something cold, something hard, something unyielding. I am done crying, I said to the empty room. Nana Rose turned from the window. Her eyes were dry now, too. Good, she said, because tears won't get you your house back, but a good lawyer and a ruthless plan will. She reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. I am calling the estate attorney. And Sophia, she added, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, when we walk into that party on Saturday, wear the red dress, the one Arthur bought you. If they want a show, let's give them a finale they will never forget. I looked at my reflection in the dark window. The woman staring back at me didn't look like a victim anymore. She looked like the Count of Monte Cristo, and she was ready for her revenge. The next morning I borrowed a thermal delivery bag from a friend at the shelter and pulled my cap low over my eyes. I was no longer Sophia the data analyst or Sophia the granddaughter. I was just a nameless, faceless delivery driver, dropping off a lunch order that nobody had actually placed. It was the only way I could get close enough to the house without alerting the neighbors, or worse, my family. I parked the rusted sedan I had rented with Nana Rose's card 2 houses down from 42 Hawthorne Street. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I told Zuri to stay low in the back seat and gave her my phone with headphones to watch cartoons, praying she would stay quiet. I grabbed the empty food bag and stepped out into the biting wind. The street looked the same as it always had, lined with ancient oak trees and well-kept lawns. But as I approached number 42, the air changed. The sound of heavy machinery shattered the peaceful silence of the neighborhood. I stopped at the edge of the driveway, and what I saw made my knees buckle. A yellow excavator was parked in the middle of the front yard. Its metal claw was dug deep into the earth, ripping up the soil in violent, jagged chunks. But it wasn't just dirt they were digging up. They were destroying the garden. My grandfather's rose garden. Grandpa Arthur had planted those bushes 40 years ago. He had tended to them every single day, pruning them with his calloused hands, talking to them as if they were his children. They were a rare variety, deep velvet red, and they were the pride of the neighborhood. When I was a little girl, he taught me how to deadhead the blooms, explaining that you had to cut away the old to make room for the new. That garden was where he told me stories about our ancestors. It was where I took my prom photos. It was where Zuri took her first wobbly steps. Now I watched in horror as the excavator's claw ripped a massive bush out by its roots. The sound of the ancient wood snapping was like the breaking of bones. Stop, I wanted to scream. Please stop. But I couldn't make a sound. I forced myself to walk up the driveway, clutching the delivery bag like a shield. That was when I saw her. Harper was standing on the porch, wrapped in a pristine cream-colored wool coat that probably cost more than my entire year of rent. She was holding a steaming latte in one hand and pointing with the other, directing the construction crew with the air of a queen commanding her subjects. She looked impatient, annoyed that the destruction wasn't happening fast enough. "Get all of it out!" Harper shouted over the roar of the engine. The foreman, an older man with graying hair, paused and leaned out of the cab. He looked at the roses, then back at Harper. "Ma'am, these root systems are deep. These are heritage roses. Are you sure you don't want to transplant them? They are worth a fortune. Harper let out a sharp, cruel laugh. Transplant them? Absolutely not. We are putting in an infinity pool and a minimalist Zen garden. I want clean lines. I want concrete and white pebbles. She took a sip of her latte, her face twisting in disgust as she looked at the pile of uprooted flowers. Besides, she added, her voice carrying clearly in the cold air, do be careful with that trash. It is thorny and wild and ugly. Just like the previous owner. The air left my lungs. She was talking about my grandfather. She was calling the man who built this house, the man who raised a family here, thorny and ugly. Harper, who had never worked a day in her life, was standing on the foundation he built and spitting on his memory. I stood frozen near the hedge, my knuckles white as I gripped the bag. The rage that surged through me was so hot it almost melted the snow at my feet. I wanted to march up there and slap the cup out of her hand. I wanted to scream that she was the ugly one, but then a small voice shattered my focus. Mommy? I spun around. Zuri had rolled down the back window of the car. She was pointing a mitten-covered hand toward the house. Mommy, look. House. Grandpa's flowers. Her voice was high and clear, cutting through the mechanical noise. Panic flooded my veins. I saw Harper's head snap toward the street. She narrowed her eyes, scanning the sidewalk. I dropped to a crouch behind the neighbor's large trash cans, my heart beating so loud I thought it would give me away. I waved frantically at Zuri, putting a finger to my lips, pleading with my eyes for her to get down. Thankfully, the excavator roared to life again, drowning out any further sound. Who is that? Harper called out to the foreman. Just a delivery driver, I think, the man yelled back. Probably lost. Harper sneered. Well, tell them to move along. This is private property, not a parking lot for the help. I stayed crouched, breathing in the smell of old garbage and cold asphalt, waiting for her to turn away. I was about to retreat to the car when the front door opened again. My brother Andre stepped out. He looked different. The confident, swaggering brother I remembered was gone. In his place was a man who looked like he hadn't slept in a week. His expensive suit was wrinkled, and he kept running a hand over his shaved head, wiping away sweat despite the freezing temperature. Babe, come look at the rendering for the pool, Harper chirped, her mood instantly shifting to saccharine sweetness. It is going to be perfect for the influencers' party next month. Not now, Harper Andre snapped, pushing past her. He walked down the porch steps, pacing back and forth on the walkway, clutching his phone to his ear. I need to take this, he muttered. It is business. Harper rolled her eyes but turned back to the construction crew. I took the opportunity to creep closer, using the noise of the digging to mask my footsteps. I needed to hear who he was talking to. Was it the lawyer? Was it Mom? Andre stopped near the edge of the driveway, just 10 feet from where I was hiding. He hissed into the phone, his voice trembling with fear. Look, Tony, I told you I am good for it. You don't need to send anyone to the house. Harper is here. I held my breath. Tony. We didn't know anyone named Tony. I just need 2 more weeks, Andre pleaded. The Airbnb money is coming in, but it is not enough to cover the vigorish. I know. Listen to me. He lowered his voice, looking over his shoulder at Harper to make sure she wasn't listening. I am selling the place, okay? I am selling the house. I have a buyer lined up. Cash offer, 3.2 million. I just need to get the deeds sorted out. My sister she is out of the picture. She is gone. Nobody knows where she is. I will forge the final signature next week. My hand flew to my mouth to stifle a gasp. He wasn't renovating the house for his family. He wasn't keeping it as a legacy. He was in deep with a loan shark, and he was planning to sell my inheritance to save his own skin. He was going to sell Grandpa's house for quick cash to pay off a gambling debt. No, Andre whispered, wiping sweat from his forehead. Don't hurt her. Don't touch Harper. I swear on my life, Tony, you will get your money next month. Just call off your guys. He hung up the phone and stood there for a moment, shaking. Then he put on a fake smile, straightened his jacket, and turned back to his wife. Everything okay, babe? Harper called out. Yeah. Andre lied, his voice cracking. Just investors. They are really excited about the property value. I watched him walk back up the stairs, placing a hand on Harper's lower back, acting the part of the devoted husband. But I knew the truth now. They were not just thieves. They were desperate, and desperate people make mistakes. I crept back to the car, my legs feeling like lead. I slid into the driver's seat and locked the doors. Zuri looked at me with wide, innocent eyes. "Mommy, why did the man break Grandpa's flowers?" she asked softly. I started the engine, my grip on the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. "He didn't break them, baby," I said, my voice steady and cold. "He just dug his own grave." I put the car in gear and drove away slowly. I had seen enough. I didn't need to see the rest of the garden destroyed. I had the ammunition I needed. Andre was scared. He was in debt. And he had just admitted to a felony on a phone call that I had witnessed. I drove straight back to the hotel. Nana Rose was waiting. And when I told her about Tony and the debt and the plan to sell, she didn't get angry. She just smiled. It was a terrifying, calm smile. "Good," she said. "If he is desperate to sell, let's give him a buyer." I looked at her confused. "Who, me?" Nana Rose said. "But he won't know it is me. We are going to make him an offer he cannot refuse. And then at the party, we are going to reveal who really bought his debt." The game had changed. It wasn't just about reclaiming my house anymore. It was about watching them walk into a trap of their own making. And I was going to enjoy springing it. The smell of old paper and fresh coffee in Malik's office was the first thing that made me feel grounded in days. Malik had been my friend since law school, one of the few people who knew the real me before I became the family outcast. He sat behind his mahogany desk, his sleeves rolled up, looking at the stack of documents Nana Rose had forwarded to him with a grim expression that made my stomach turn. I sat opposite him, my hands wrapped around a warm mug waiting for the verdict. Sophia, Malik said, pushing his glasses up his nose. "You need to prepare yourself. This is not just bad management. This is not just a family misunderstanding." He turned his computer monitor around so I could see the digital scan of a document dated 4 years ago. It was a modification to the Washington Family Trust, the fund my grandfather had set up to ensure I would always have a safety net. The document authorized the transfer of full administrative control to a new investment manager. I leaned in, squinting at the screen. The name listed as the new manager was Andre Washington. And at the bottom of the page, right above the line for the beneficiary, was a signature. It read, "Sophia Washington." I felt the air leave the room. The signature looked like mine. It had the same slant, the same pressure points. But there was one tiny detail missing. My grandfather had taught me to always put a small, almost invisible loop at the end of the letter a secret mark to prevent fraud. This signature did not have the loop. I did not sign this. I whispered, my voice trembling. I was in the hospital, having Zuri 4 years ago on this date. I was in labor for 20 hours. I could barely hold a pen, let alone sign complex legal documents. Malik nodded, his jaw tight. "I know. I checked the hospital records. You were under heavy sedation when this document was notarized. Which means your parents and your brother didn't just steal your money, they stole your identity. They forged your signature to appoint Andre as the trustee, giving him legal power to invest the funds however he saw fit." He clicked to the next page, and here is how they justified it. See this clause. It says the manager can withdraw funds for property development and asset appreciation. They have been draining the trust for years, claiming they are investing it in the Hawthorne house to increase its value for you. I slammed my hand on the desk. But they are not increasing its value, they are destroying it. And Andre is planning to sell it to pay off a loan shark. Malik sat back, rubbing his temples. That is the catch, Sophia. If Andre can prove that the money went into the house even if it was a bad renovation, he might avoid jail time. He could claim incompetence. We need to prove intent. We need to prove that the money from the trust didn't go into the foundation or the roof. We need to prove it went into their pockets. We need to find the leak. He stood up and walked over to the whiteboard, uncapping a red marker. This is a federal crime, Sophia. Wire fraud, forgery, embezzlement. If we nail them on this, they are looking at 10 to 20 years in federal prison. Not just Andre, your parents too, since they witnessed the signature. But we need a smoking gun. We need to see them spending your trust fund money on something that is undeniably personal. Something that cannot be explained away as a house repair. I looked at the board, seeing the names of my family written in red ink. My mother, my father, my brother, the people who were supposed to love me. They had looked at my newborn daughter 4 years ago and decided to rob her future to fund their lifestyle. The sadness I had felt in the car was completely gone now. All that was left was a cold, hard determination. We will find it, I said, my voice steady. Andre is sloppy, Harper is vain. They will slip up. Malik sat back down and began typing furiously. I am going to request a subpoena for their personal bank accounts, but that takes time. We might not get it before the gala on Saturday. We need something faster. Do you have access to any of the old accounts? Any joint notifications? I shook my head. They cut me off from everything when I left. They changed all the passwords. Just then my phone buzzed on the desk. It was a sharp, insistent vibration that made us both jump. I looked down. It was a notification from a banking app I hadn't used in years. A credit card that my father had opened in my name when I was 18 to help me build credit. I thought they had closed it a decade ago. I picked up the phone, my heart pounding. Alert, the screen read. Large transaction detected. I unlocked the phone and opened the app. My eyes widened as I read the details. The card was still active, and someone had just swiped it. Malik, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Look at this. He leaned over the desk to look at my screen. The transaction had just gone through 2 minutes ago. The location was the Restoration Hardware Gallery in the Gold Coast district, one of the most expensive furniture stores in the city. The amount was $15,000. $15,000? Malik repeated, a slow smile spreading across his face. Nobody spends $15,000 on lumber or drywall at a luxury furniture store. That is decor. That is personal. I scrolled down. There were pending items listed: a cloud sofa, Egyptian cotton throws, and a custom marble coffee table. They are shopping right now, I said, grabbing my coat. They are using a credit card in my name, likely linked to the trust for automatic payments to buy furniture for a house they are about to sell. Malik grabbed his briefcase. This is it, Sophia. This is the smoking gun. If we can catch them in the act, or at least get the receipt showing the delivery address is not for a renovation, but for staging, we have them. I didn't wait for him to finish. I was already at the door. I knew exactly where that store was, and I knew exactly who I was going to find there. I am going to the store, I said, checking my reflection in the glass door of the office. The woman staring back looked fierce. Be careful, Malik warned. Do not cause a scene. We need the paper trail, not a public fight. I turned back to him, my hand on the doorknob. Oh, I won't cause a scene, Malik. I am just going to go window shopping. After all, I am the one paying for it. I walked out into the cold Chicago afternoon, but the fire in my chest was burning hotter than ever. They were spending my daughter's college fund on throw pillows. They were laughing and sipping complimentary sparkling water while they swiped a card with my name on it. I hailed a cab and gave the driver the address. Restoration Hardware. Step on it. As the city blurred past the window, I pictured Harper's face. I pictured my mother's fake concern. They thought they were untouchable. They thought I was still the scared little girl shivering in a shelter. They had no idea that I was coming for them, and I was bringing the receipt. The taxi screeched to a halt in front of the Restoration Hardware Gallery in the Gold Coast district, a neighborhood where the air itself smelled like money and exclusivity. I paid the driver with the last of the cash Nana Rose had given me and stepped onto the sidewalk. The building loomed before me, a grand historic structure that had been converted into a temple of luxury home design. Through the massive glass windows, I could see chandeliers that cost more than a college tuition, and sofas that looked like clouds trapped in linen. My reflection in the glass was a stark contrast to the world inside. My coat was worn at the elbows, my boots were scuffed, and my hair was pulled back in a severe bun. But my eyes were burning. I did not look like a shopper. I looked like a storm making landfall. I pushed open the heavy brass doors, and the warmth of the showroom enveloped me. Soft jazz played in the background, masking the sound of credit cards being swiped. The scent of expensive candles and fresh espresso filled the air. I walked past a couple arguing over a dining table, my boots thudding softly on the reclaimed wood floors. I did not need a map to find them. I just needed to follow the sound of the laugh that used to be my favorite sound in the world, until I realized it was always at my expense. I found them in the living room section on the third floor. My mother Patricia was sitting on a massive white sectional sofa, running her hand over the fabric with a look of pure adoration. Harper was standing next to her, holding a fabric swatch book pointing at a shade of gray that looked identical to every other shade of gray in the room. They looked like the perfect mother and daughter duo. They looked happy. It was a domestic intimacy that I had craved my entire life, and seeing them share it now while I was living in a shelter, and my daughter was sleeping in a coat, broke something inside me that I didn't know was still intact. I took a deep breath, pushing down the heartbreak and letting the anger rise to take its place. I walked up behind the sofa, moving silently until I was standing right next to the armrest, where my mother's hand was resting. "That is a beautiful choice, Mom," I said, my voice low and steady. "It looks very comfortable, much more comfortable than the cot at the shelter." My mother jumped as if she had been electrocuted. She spun around, clutching her chest, her eyes wide with terror. When she saw it was me, the fear morphed instantly into embarrassment. She looked around frantically to see if anyone had heard. "Sophia," she hissed, her face draining of color, "what are you doing here? You nearly gave me a heart attack." Harper looked up from her swatch book, her expression shifting from surprise to a sneer so quickly it was almost impressive. "Well, look who decided to crawl out of the woodwork," Harper drawled, snapping the book shut. "I didn't know they let just anyone in here. Don't you have a shift at a diner to get to?" I ignored Harper and kept my eyes locked on my mother. She was trembling not because she was happy to see me, but because I was a stain on her perfect afternoon. "I asked you a question, Mom," I said, stepping closer. "It is a lovely sofa. How do you plan to pay for it? With the money you stole from your granddaughter's future? Or with the money you got from selling my identity to Andre?" Patricia stood up, her hands fluttering nervously. "Sophia, stop it. You are making a scene. Lower your voice. We can talk about this later. This is not the place. Not the place." I laughed, a harsh, humorless sound that made a passing sales associate pause. "This is exactly the place, because according to the notification on my phone, I am the one buying this furniture. So I think I have a right to know if I like it." I reached out to touch the fabric of the sofa, the soft, creamy linen that my trust fund was paying for. Before my fingers could graze the material, Harper stepped forward and slapped my hand away. "Do not touch that," she snapped, her voice raising an octave. "Your hands are filthy. You have probably been on the subway or God knows where else. We don't want your germs on our custom furniture." I looked at my hand, red from her slap, and then back at her. The audacity was breathtaking. She was wearing a diamond tennis bracelet that I was fairly certain my mother had bought her, and she was looking at me like I was a disease. "You are right, Harper," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "My hands are dirty. They are dirty from working double shifts to feed my daughter because my family stole my house. But at least they are not dirty from signing fake documents." A sales associate, a young man with a perfectly groomed beard and a tablet, approached us with a nervous smile. "Excuse me, ladies, is everything all right? I have the final invoice ready for signature." He held the tablet out towards my mother, but I moved faster. I snatched the device from his hand before anyone could react. "Hey," Harper protested, reaching for it. "Give that back." I looked at the screen. The total was $15,400. The delivery address was 42 Hawthorne Street, and the name on the billing information was in bold black letters. Sophia Washington. I turned the screen so they could both see it. Sophia Washington. I read aloud, my eyes locking with my mother's. That is funny. I don't remember authorizing a $15,000 sofa. Mom, did you forget that I am Sophia Washington? Or did you think that if you just ignored me long enough, I would cease to exist and you could just wear my name like a costume? My mother looked like she was going to be sick. She reached for my arm, her grip desperate. Sophia, please. Give him the tablet. We can explain. It is an investment. We are staging the house to sell it, and then we will pay you back. I swear, we are doing this for you. For me? I pulled my arm away from her touch as if she burned me. You are staging my house to sell it to pay off Andre's gambling debts. Don't lie to me. I know about Tony. I know about everything. The mention of the loan shark made my mother freeze. She knew. She knew about the danger Andre was in, and she had chosen to sacrifice me to save him. The betrayal hit me anew, sharp and agonizing. Harper, realizing that the sales associate was watching with wide eyes, decided to change tactics. She stepped into my personal space, her perfume cloying and sweet, masking the rot beneath. She didn't look scared anymore. She looked vicious. She leaned in close, so close I could see the heavy foundation settling into the lines around her eyes. She lowered her voice so only I could hear her tone dripping with venom. You can scream all you want, Sophia. You can wave that tablet around and cry to the manager. But it won't change anything. You want to know the truth. Mom and Dad didn't steal from you. They chose. They chose Andre. And they chose me. Because we are the winners. We are the ones who are going to carry this family name forward. She paused, a cruel smile playing on her lips. You are just the spare. You are the mistake they made before they got it right with Andre. Nobody cares about you, nobody is going to believe you. You are just a homeless, bitter woman harassing a respectable family. So why don't you be a good little girl and run along before I call the police and tell them you are assaulting us? I am sure they will believe the woman in the Chanel coat over the one who looks like she dug her clothes out of a dumpster. She pulled back, smiling brightly at the sales associate. I am so sorry, she said to him. This woman is disturbing us. Could you please call security? I stared at her, the tablet still in my hand. The threat hung in the air, heavy and real. I looked at my mother, waiting for her to defend me, to tell Harper to stop. But Patricia just looked away, studying the floor, refusing to meet my eyes. That was the moment the last thread of hope snapped. There was no saving them. There was no reconciliation. There was only war. I handed the tablet back to the stunned sales associate. Cancel the order, I said calmly. This card has been reported stolen. I turned to Harper, whose smug smile faltered for a second. Call the police, Harper. Please do. I would love to show them this receipt, but you won't, because you know exactly what will happen if they run the fingerprints on that credit card. I turned on my heel and walked away, my heart pounding a rhythm of war against my ribs. I could hear Harper screeching at the sales clerk behind me, but I didn't look back. I had the evidence. I had the receipt. And now I knew exactly where I stood. I was the spare. But they forgot one thing about spares. We are the ones you need when everything else breaks down. And I was about to break their world apart. The smell of hickory smoke and slow-cooked ribs drifted over the wooden fence of my Aunt May's backyard, a scent that used to mean safety and celebration. Now, as I crouched in the shadows of the alleyway, pressing my ear against the damp wood, it just smelled like betrayal. I had tracked Andre here because I knew he couldn't resist an audience. Aunt May's monthly barbecue was the family courtroom, the place where rumors were born and reputations were solidified. I needed to hear exactly what narrative my brother was spinning to the extended family to explain my sudden disappearance. I held my phone up to a crack in the fence, the voice recorder app running the red waveform jumping as a burst of laughter erupted from the patio. I peered through the gap. The yard was filled with cousins, uncles, and family friends, all holding paper plates and sweating beer bottles. In the center of it all, holding court by the grill, was Andre. He had a bourbon in one hand and a pair of tongs in the other, swaying slightly. He was drunk, but it was that dangerous, confident kind of drunk, where the lies flow smoother than the liquor. "Man, you have to hand it to you, Andre," my Uncle Louis said, clapping my brother on the shoulder. "Taking over the Hawthorne property and managing the trust. That is a lot of responsibility for a young man. We were worried when Arthur passed that the legacy might fall apart." Andre took a long sip of his drink, his face twisting into a mask of false humility. "It is a burden, Uncle Louis, I won't lie. But someone had to step up. You know how Dad's back is, and Mom? Well, she is too soft. I am just doing what Grandpa would have wanted. Building generational wealth, expanding the empire." He waved his tongs toward the house as if he had built it with his own hands, not stolen it with a forgery pen. "But what about Sophia?" my cousin Keisha asked. "I haven't seen her in months. Is she okay? I called her, but her number is disconnected." My breath hitched in my throat. Keisha. We used to be inseparable. I wanted to scream her name to tell her I was right here, just on the other side of the fence. Andre sighed a long, tragic sound that made my skin crawl. He lowered his voice, forcing the group to lean in. This was his performance. This was the assassination of my character. "Sophia is struggling," Andre said, shaking his head. "We didn't want to make it public out of respect for her privacy. But she fell off the wagon hard, Keisha. The pills, the instability, it got bad." "Liar," I mouthed, tears stinging my eyes. I had never touched a pill in my life. I barely even drank wine. "We tried to help her," Andre continued, warming up to his fabrication. "Mom and Dad and we staged an intervention. We offered to pay for rehab, but she refused. She got violent. She started selling things from the house to buy drugs. That is why we had to take over the deed. We had to protect the asset before she smoked it all away. We are just holding it in trust until she gets clean. If she ever gets clean." A murmur of sympathy rippled through the group. "Poor thing," Aunt May clucked. "And with that little girl to look after. It is a tragedy." "She is safe though, right?" Uncle Louis asked. "Oh, she is in a facility upstate?" Andre lied smoothly. "We are paying for the best care. Harper sends care packages every week. We just want our sister back." I had heard enough. My hand was shaking so hard, the video on my screen was vibrating. He wasn't just stealing my money. He was stealing my history. He was painting me as a junkie to justify his theft, ensuring that if I ever reached out to these people for help, they would view me with suspicion and pity rather than outrage. He had insulated himself with a wall of concern. I ended the recording and shoved the phone into my pocket. I needed to get out of here before I did something reckless like kick down the gate and scream the truth. I needed to get this recording to Malik. This was defamation. This was proof of his malicious intent. I turned to head back down the alley toward where I had parked the rental car. The gravel crunched loudly under my boot. I froze. "Who is there?" Andre's voice rang out sharp and sudden. I didn't answer. I pulled my hood up and started to walk faster, keeping my head down. "Hey," I said, "who is back there?" I heard the gate unlatch and slam against the fence. Heavy footsteps pounded on the gravel behind me. I broke into a run, but I wasn't fast enough. A hand clamped down on my shoulder, spinning me around with bruising force. I found myself face to face with my brother. His eyes were bloodshot, the smell of bourbon and expensive cologne radiating off him in waves. When he saw it was me, the aggression in his face didn't soften. It hardened into a sneer. "Well, well," Andre hissed, tightening his grip on my shoulder. "The prodigal junkie returns. Enjoying the show. Sophia, let go of me, Andre," I said, my voice cold and steady, despite the pounding of my heart. "I have everything on tape. I have you lying to the family. I have the receipts from the furniture store. It is over." Andre laughed, a wet, ugly sound. "You have nothing. You are a ghost, Sophia. You heard them in there. They think you are crazy. Who are they going to believe, the successful businessman renovating the family estate, or the homeless woman creeping around in alleys? I pulled my arm free and took a step back. Nana Rose will believe me. The judge will believe me when Malik shows him the forged trust documents. The mention of the law made Andre's confidence falter for a second, but then a dark, twisted realization crossed his face. He took a step toward me, crowding me against the brick wall of the neighbor's garage. He wasn't playing the successful brother anymore. He was the desperate gambler who owed money to dangerous men. "You listen to me," he whispered, leaning down so his face was inches from mine. "You are not going to talk to Nana Rose. You are not going to talk to a judge. You are going to disappear again, Sophia. Because if you don't, I will take the one thing you actually care about." I stared at him. "What are you talking about, Zuri?" he said, the name falling from his lips like a curse. I felt a chill go through my entire body that had nothing to do with the winter air. "Don't you dare say her name. You are homeless." Sophia Andre continued, his voice dripping with mock concern. "You are living in a shelter. You have no income. And now, according to the family narrative, you have a history of substance abuse and mental instability. All I have to do is make one call to Child Protective Services. I will tell them you are using again. I will tell them you are dragging that child through unsafe conditions. I have the money to hire doctors who will testify that you are unfit." He poked me in the chest with a finger. "I will take custody of her, Sophia. Harper and I have a big, beautiful house with an empty room. The courts love a stable, wealthy couple. We will raise her, and you will never see her again." I stopped breathing. The world narrowed down to his bloodshot eyes and the cruel set of his mouth. He was threatening to steal my daughter. He was threatening to use the poverty he caused to rip my child from my arms. "So here is the deal," Andre said, stepping back and buttoning his jacket. "You keep your mouth shut. You don't show up at the gala. You let the sale go through next week. And maybe, just maybe, I will let you keep your kid. But if you so much as whisper my name to a lawyer, Zuri is mine." He turned and walked back toward the gate, whistling a low, tuneless melody. I stood there in the alley, trembling. But it wasn't fear shaking my bones anymore. It was the adrenaline of a soldier who just realized there are no rules of engagement left. He had crossed the final line. He had brought my daughter into the war. I reached into my pocket and touched my phone. I hadn't stopped recording. I had caught the threat. I had caught the blackmail. I watched him disappear into the warm glow of the backyard party. He thought he had just checkmated me. He thought the threat of losing Zuri would break me. But he had forgotten who raised me. He had forgotten that a mother backed into a corner is not a victim. She is a weapon. I wiped the tears from my face. I wasn't going to hide. I wasn't going to run. I was going to that gala. And I was going to burn his entire world to the ground, not just for the house, not just for the money, but for Zuri. The library in Nana Rose's mansion was a fortress of mahogany, and silence a room where the air smelled of old paper and serious decisions. I sat in a high-backed leather chair, my hands still trembling slightly as I placed my phone on the desk. The recording of Andre's voice had just finished playing his threat to take Zuri, echoing off the walls before fading into the heavy stillness. I waited for Nana Rose to explode. I waited for her to throw her teacup against the wall, to scream, to call the police immediately. Any grandmother would be furious to hear her grandson threaten to kidnap her great-granddaughter. But Nana Rose was not just any grandmother. She was the matriarch of the Washington dynasty, a woman who had built an empire in a city that constantly tried to tear her down. She sat perfectly still, her eyes fixed on a point in the distance, her face a mask of terrifying calm. She took a slow sip of her tea, placed the cup back on the saucer with a delicate clink, and then finally looked at me. "He is desperate," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. "And a desperate man is a careless man." I leaned forward, confused. "Nana, did you hear him? He said he would call Child Protective Services. He said he would take Zuri." We have to stop him now. We have to call the police and show them this recording. We have to get a restraining order. Nana Rose raised a hand, stopping me mid-sentence. No, she said firmly. If you go to the police now with a recording made without his consent in a private setting, a good lawyer could get it thrown out. Even if they listen, Andre will claim he was drunk, that it was a family dispute. He will get a slap on the wrist. He will walk away with a bruised ego, but he will still have the house. He will still have the trust fund, and he will be angrier than ever. She stood up and walked to the fireplace, staring into the flames. You want justice, Sophia. But justice is a slow game. In this family, we do not settle for small victories. We practice the Washington way. The Washington way. I had heard that phrase growing up, usually when Grandpa Arthur was making a business deal. It meant winning, but more than that, it meant winning so completely that your opponent never recovered. What does that mean right now? I asked. It means we do not strike the snake when it is sleeping, she said, turning to face me. We wait until it rears its head to strike. We wait until it exposes its belly. Andre is climbing a ladder right now. He thinks he is at the top. He thinks he has won. If we pull the ladder now, he falls a few feet and brushes himself off. Her eyes hardened, turning into flint. I want him to climb higher. I want him to think he touches the sky. I want him to believe he has everything he ever wanted. And then when he is looking down at us, thinking we are small and defeated, that is when we pull the ladder. That is when the fall destroys him. She walked back to the desk and opened a drawer, pulling out a small velvet box. On Saturday at my gala, I am going to give a performance. I am going to let Andre and Harper believe that I am frail. I am going to let them believe that my health is failing and that I am preparing to hand over the keys to the kingdom. I frowned. Why would you do that? Because greed makes people blind, Nana Rose said. If they think I am dying, they will get sloppy. They will get arrogant. They will think the inheritance is days away, and they will spend money they do not have. They will sign papers they should not sign. We are going to feed their greed until it chokes them. She opened the velvet box. Inside was a bottle of pills. They were just vitamins, but they looked medicinal. At the party, I will take these. I will lean on you. I will let Andre make a toast to my legacy. And while he is toasting, while Harper is preening for the cameras, thinking she is the new matriarch, we will be preparing the final blow. I felt a shiver run down my spine. It was a cold plan. It was ruthless. And it was exactly what we needed. But Nana, I said, there is still one problem. It is his word against mine about the house. He has the forged deed. He has the narrative that I am unstable. Even with the trust fund fraud, he could drag this out in court for years. We need something undeniable. We need to prove he is not renovating that house but destroying it. We need to prove he is selling it. Nana Rose smiled a slow, secretive smile that reminded me instantly of Grandpa Arthur. Your grandfather was a paranoid man, Sophia. He loved that house on Hawthorne Street more than anything except for me. He built it to be a sanctuary, but he also built it to be a fortress. He didn't trust alarm systems monitored by strangers. He trusted his own eyes. She pushed her laptop toward me. Arthur installed a closed-circuit security system in the house 10 years ago. He hid the cameras inside the molding behind the bookshelves, even in the garden trellis. He wanted to make sure that if anyone ever tried to harm his home, he would see it. My eyes widened. I never knew that. Nobody knew, Nana Rose said. Not even your parents. Especially not your parents. Arthur disconnected the feed to the main security panel years ago, so Andre thinks the old system is dead. But the cameras are hardwired. They record to a private server that only Arthur had the password to. She typed a series of numbers into the laptop. My birthday. I have not looked at these feeds since he died, she whispered. It was too painful to see the empty rooms. But yesterday, after you told me about the rose garden, I logged in. She turned the screen toward me. Click on the live feed, Sophia. I reached out my finger, hovering over the trackpad. I clicked the icon labeled Hawthorne Master Server. The screen split into a grid of 12 squares. My breath caught in my throat. I was looking inside my house. The cameras were high definition, hidden perfectly. I saw the living room where the furniture had been rearranged to look like a staged showroom. I saw the kitchen where Harper was currently standing, screaming at a catering chef. I could hear her voice crystal clear through the hidden microphones. "I don't care if it is expensive," Harper was yelling. "I want the champagne tower right here. We need to impress the buyers tomorrow." I clicked on another square. The study. Grandpa's study. Andre was there. He was sitting at Grandpa's desk, surrounded by stacks of papers. He was on the phone, the speakerphone on. "Yeah, Tony," Andre said, his voice echoing in the quiet room. "I have the papers right here. I am practicing her signature. It will be ready by Monday. I just need to get the old lady through the weekend. She looks like she is on her last legs anyway. Once she kicks the bucket or signs over power of attorney, the house is yours." I gasped. He was confessing. He was confessing to forgery, to the sale, to waiting for Nana Rose to die. And he was doing it all on camera. Nana Rose watched the screen, her face unmoving, but I saw the fire in her eyes. "He thinks nobody is watching," she said softly. "He thinks he is the king of the castle." She closed the laptop, a sound of finality. "We have the eyes, Sophia. We have the ears. And on Saturday we are going to make sure the whole world sees what we just saw. Now go upstairs and get some rest. You need to look perfect for the gala. You are not going as the victim. You are going as the heir." I stood up, feeling a surge of power I had never felt before. The fear of Andre. The fear of losing Zuri. It was gone. I had the ultimate weapon. I had the truth recorded in high definition. I walked to the door but stopped and looked back at my grandmother. "Nana," I asked, "what is the Washington way for mercy?" She looked at me, her silhouette framed by the firelight. "Mercy is for those who ask for forgiveness, Sophia. Not for those who steal it." I nodded and walked out of the library. The alliance was formed. The trap was set. And as I climbed the grand staircase to the guest wing, I checked my phone. The live feed was still running in my pocket. I watched Andre pour himself another drink, completely unaware that he was already in a cage. He just didn't know the door was locked yet. The office of Marcus Heavy, a forensic accountant recommended by Nana Rose's lawyer, was a stark contrast to the luxury of the Drake Hotel. It was located in a nondescript building in the Loop, a windowless room illuminated only by the glow of 3 massive computer monitors and the harsh fluorescent strip overhead. The air smelled of ozone and stale coffee, the scent of a place where numbers were crunched until they confessed their secrets. I sat across from Marcus, watching his reflection in the dark screen as his fingers flew across the keyboard. He was a man of few words, treating financial fraud not with outrage, but with the clinical detachment of a surgeon cutting out a tumor. Sophia, Marcus said, not looking away from the spreadsheet that was cascading down his center monitor. "You were right to be suspicious of your sister-in-law. Greedy people are usually sloppy, but Harper is exceptionally arrogant. She made the classic mistake of thinking that because the money was coming from an app, the government would not see it." He clicked a mouse button and a document expanded to fill the screen. It was a bank statement. But it was not the joint account she shared with Andre. It was a personal checking account at a completely different bank, one registered solely in her maiden name. "Here is the flow," Marcus explained, using a laser pointer to trace the lines. "These deposits here, ranging from $1,600 to $3,000 a week, are payouts from Airbnb. They go directly into this private account. She has collected over $120,000 in the last 18 months. I looked at the total figure. That was money my grandfather's house had earned, money that could have paid for Zuri's preschool, money that could have kept us off the street. Now let's look at her tax returns." Marcus continued, pulling up a PDF on the left screen. "This is their joint return for last year. Do you see a Schedule E form for rental income?" I squinted at the dense rows of numbers. "No." "Exactly," Marcus said, leaning back in his chair. "Because there isn't one. Harper did not declare a single cent of this income to the IRS. She is treating it like tax-free pocket money. In the eyes of the federal government, this is tax evasion. She owes taxes on $60,000 of unreported income just for the last fiscal year, plus penalties and interest. And given the amount, the IRS does not just send a bill, they send agents. I felt a cold smile tug at the corner of my mouth. Harper, who obsessed over her image, who judged me for my poverty, was a common criminal. But that is not the worst of it, Marcus said, his voice dropping an octave. While I was digging through her credit report to find that hidden bank account, I found something else. Something that concerns you directly. He pulled up another document. It was a loan application for a federal student loan. The date was from 6 months ago, right around the time I was evicted. The applicant name was Sophia Washington. The social security number was mine. But the address listed for correspondence was a P.O. box in a suburb I had never visited. I stared at the screen, my blood turning to ice. I graduated years ago, Marcus. I don't have any student loans. I paid them off with the small inheritance Grandma Dorothy left me. I know, Marcus said softly. But according to this, you borrowed $20,000 for continuing education at an online university. The money was dispersed to the school and then refunded to the student when they withdrew from classes a week later. The refund check was mailed to that P.O. box. Harper. I whispered, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. She took out a loan in my name, enrolled in a fake course, dropped out, and pocketed the refund check. This is identity theft, Sophia, Marcus said firmly. Aggravated identity theft because she used it to defraud the Department of Education. We are talking about mandatory prison time. She didn't just steal your house. She tried to ruin your financial future so thoroughly that you would never be able to fight back. She wanted to bury you under debt you didn't know you had. I sat back in the chair, feeling the weight of the betrayal. It wasn't just greed, it was malice. Harper hated me so much that she wanted to ensure I could never rise again. She wanted me permanently broken, a cautionary tale to make herself look better by comparison. Print it, I said, my voice hard. Print everything. The bank statements, the tax returns, the loan application. I want a file thick enough to choke her. As the printer whirred to life, spitting out the evidence of their crimes, I remembered something. If Harper was hiding money from Andre, what was Andre hiding? I thought about the conversation I had overheard in the garden about the man named Tony and the gambling debt. Marcus, I said, pulling a flash drive from my pocket. This is an old backup of Andre's laptop. He gave it to me years ago when he got a new one, told me to wipe it and keep it. I never used it, but I kept it. I think his cloud account might still be synced. Marcus took the drive and plugged it in. He ran a quick bypass on the password Andre always used, his birthday, and the desktop appeared on the third monitor. It was a snapshot of Andre's digital life. Most of it was useless. Old photos, fantasy football leagues. But then Marcus opened the Cloud Sync folder. It began to update in real time, pulling down files from the current devices linked to the account. There I pointed to a folder labeled Project Horizon. It sounded like a real estate deal, but when Marcus opened it, it wasn't blueprints. It was screenshots, dozens of them. They were from a sports betting app. The numbers were staggering. -5,000, -10,000. A parlay bet on the Super Bowl that lost $50,000. And then a spreadsheet. I leaned in, reading the columns. It was a ledger of debts. At the bottom, highlighted in red, was a name, Tony, and the figure next to it was $200,000. Next to the figure was a date, the Tuesday after Nana Rose's gala, and next to the date was a note typed in all caps, Sell Hawthorne. Payment in full or hospital. I covered my mouth with my hand. Hospital was a euphemism. Men like Tony didn't put you in the hospital to recover. They put you there because they broke every bone in your body. Andre isn't just selling the house because he is greedy. I realized the horror washing over me. He is selling it because he is terrified. He owes $200,000 to a loan shark, and the deadline is 3 days away. That explains the rush, Marcus said, his face grim. That explains why they are destroying the garden to put in a pool. They are trying to flip the asset fast to a cash buyer. They need the liquidity immediately. I looked at the screen at the evidence of my brother's stupidity and my sister-in-law's cruelty. They were a match made in hell. One was a thief, the other a degenerate gambler. And they were both drowning. But they weren't going to drag me down with them. I looked at the date on the spreadsheet again, the Tuesday after the gala. That meant the gala on Saturday was their last stand. It was their last chance to charm Nana Rose to get her to sign over the deed, or to secure a buyer before the loan shark came to collect. They are walking into that party thinking they are royalty, I said, standing up and gathering the warm stack of papers from the printer. They think they are going to celebrate their success. I put the tax fraud evidence in one folder and the gambling debt evidence in another. Instead, I said, staring at the glowing monitor, one last time, they are going to find out that they have already lost. I walked out of the office into the dark Chicago night. The wind was still biting, but I didn't feel it. I was armor-plated with the truth. I had the IRS on one side and the mob on the other. All I had to do was step out of the way and let the trains collide. And Saturday night, right in the middle of the ballroom, I was going to switch the tracks. The Magnificent Mile in Chicago is where dreams are sold behind plate glass windows. It is a stretch of avenue where the air smells of expensive leather and old money, a place where people like my mother and Harper come to pretend they belong to the aristocracy. I stood on the corner of Michigan Avenue, the cold wind whipping loose strands of hair across my face, watching them through the window of a high-end boutique. They were laughing, holding up dresses that cost more than most people earn in a month. Harper was twirling in a silver sequined gown looking like a disco ball that had lost its rhythm while my mother clapped her hands in delight. It was a scene of perfect, unadulterated vanity. I adjusted my scarf and pushed open the heavy glass door. The chime of the bell announced my arrival, cutting through their laughter like a knife. The sales associates, trained to smell poverty, looked up with polite disdain, but I walked past them straight toward the dressing area. Harper saw me first. Her smile dropped so fast it looked painful. She nudged my mother, who spun around, her face going pale beneath her layers of makeup. "Sophia," my mother hissed, looking around frantically, as if I were a stray dog that had wandered into a cathedral. "What are you doing here? You are following us. This is harassment. I am shopping, Mom," I said, my voice calm and level, "just like you. I need something to wear for Nana Rose's gala on Saturday." Harper let out a sharp, incredulous laugh that drew the attention of a woman trying on shoes nearby. "Shopping, you? Sophia, this is a designer boutique, not a thrift store. The socks here cost more than your entire outfit. Please just leave before you embarrass us." My mother reached into her purse, her hands shaking slightly. She pulled out a crisp $100 bill. It was a gesture I knew well. It was how she solved every problem she didn't want to deal with. She thrust the money toward me, not looking me in the eye. "Here," she whispered urgently. "Take this. Go get yourself some lunch. Go to a movie. Just go away. You cannot be seen here with us. Harper is trying on her gala dress. This is a special moment." I looked at the bill in her hand. It was an insult printed on green paper. She was trying to buy my absence for the price of a cheap dinner. She was trying to erase her daughter because I didn't fit the aesthetic of her fantasy life. Harper stepped forward, her eyes gleaming with malice. She plucked the bill from my mother's hand and waved it in my face. "Take it, Sophia. Honestly, it is more than you deserve. You can go to Walmart. I hear they have a lovely selection of polyester clearance items. Buy something that covers up, well, everything. We don't want you showing up at the gala looking like a beggar. The guest list includes senators and CEOs. We don't need the help mingling with the guests." She pressed the bill into my hand, her fingernails digging into my palm. Her touch was cold, filled with a superiority that she wore like armor. She thought she had won. She thought she had put me in my place. I looked down at the money, then back up at Harper. I didn't throw it back. I didn't tear it up. Instead, I closed my fingers around it. "Thank you, Harper," I said, a slow smile spreading across my face. Harper looked confused. She had expected a fight. She had expected tears. I will definitely use this. I continued, my voice smooth as silk. You are right. I should buy something that truly reflects the occasion. In fact, I will use this to buy something that matches your value perfectly. Cheap, artificial, and easily disposable. The smile fell off Harper's face. My mother gasped. I turned on my heel and walked out of the store, the $100 bill crumpled in my fist. I left them standing there in their expensive silence, staring at my back. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their permission. I was done playing their game. I walked 3 blocks south away from the flashy flagship stores to a quiet side street lined with brownstones. I stopped in front of a building with no sign, just a heavy black door with a gold knocker in the shape of a lion. I pressed the buzzer. Name? A voice crackled through the intercom. Sophia Washington, I said. I am here to see Madame Leola. Nana Rose sent me. There was a pause and then a heavy click as the lock disengaged. Madame Leola was a legend in Chicago. She was a black designer who had been dressing the city's true elite for 40 years. She didn't advertise. She didn't do fashion weeks. If you knew her name, you were already inside the circle. If you didn't, you couldn't afford her. I walked into the atelier, a space filled with bolts of velvet silk and brocade. The air smelled of lavender and steam. Madame Leola stood by a cutting table, a measuring tape draped around her neck like a royal stole. She was a tall woman with silver dreadlocks and eyes that saw everything, so she said, her voice rich and deep. This is Arthur's granddaughter. Rose told me you were coming. She said you needed armor. I nodded. I don't just need a dress, madame. I need a statement. I need to walk into a room and make them regret every time they looked down on me. Madame Leola smiled, and it was the first genuine warmth I had felt all day. Then we do not do black, she said, walking over to a rack of fabrics. Black is for funerals and for people who want to disappear. You are not disappearing, child. You are arriving. She pulled out a bolt of fabric that made my breath catch. It was red. Not a bright, garish red, but a deep blood-red crimson that shimmered like liquid fire under the lights. It was the color of power. It was the color of retribution. Silk crepe, Madame Leola said, draping it over my shoulder. Structural bodice, high slit. A train that commands space. When you wear this, nobody will look at your brother. Nobody will look at that wife of his. They will only see the Washington air. She began to pin the fabric around me, her hands moving with the speed and precision of a master sculptor. As she worked, I looked at myself in the floor-to-ceiling mirror. The woman staring back wasn't the tired, broken mother from the shelter. She was standing taller. Her chin was lifted. The red fabric draped around her like the robes of a queen reclaiming her throne. How much, I asked, knowing the answer would be terrifying. Madame Leola didn't look up from her pinning. For anyone else, 20,000. For Rose's granddaughter, 15. And I will have it ready by Saturday morning, $15,000. It was a fortune. It was more money than I had seen in years. But I wasn't paying for it. My trust fund was. The same trust fund Andre and Harper were trying to steal. Nana Rose had given me access to a separate emergency account that morning, one that Andre didn't know existed. I pulled out the black card Nana Rose had given me. Do it, I said. As I walked out of the atelier an hour later, the sun was setting over the city, casting long shadows across the streets. I still had the $100 bill Harper had given me in my pocket. I stopped by a trash can and pulled it out. I looked at it one last time, thinking of Harper's sneering face, her comment about Walmart, her absolute certainty that I was nothing. I didn't throw the money away. I walked over to a homeless man sitting on the corner, shivering under a thin blanket. Here, I said, pressing the bill into his hand. Get a warm meal. He looked up at me, his eyes wide. God bless you, miss. You look like an angel. I smiled, pulling my coat tighter against the wind. No, I wasn't an angel. Angels forgive. Angels show mercy. I was something else entirely. I was the storm that was about to make landfall. And when I walked into that ballroom on Saturday night wearing blood-red silk, Harper was going to wish she had never mentioned the word value to me. The transformation had begun. The victim was dead. The avenger was born. The Ritz-Carlton ballroom was a cavern of gold leaf and crystal, a place designed to make you forget that hunger or cold ever existed in the world. I stood just outside the heavy double doors listening to the hum of conversation drifting from inside. It was the sound of Chicago's elite, a low-frequency rumble of money being exchanged and alliances being formed. My heart should have been racing. I should have been terrified. A week ago, I was standing in a soup kitchen line trying to make myself invisible. But tonight, as I smoothed the silk of my crimson dress, I didn't want to be invisible. I wanted to be inevitable. I peeked through the crack between the doors. The room was already full. I saw them immediately holding court near the center of the dance floor under the largest chandelier. My family. Andre looked like a prince in a tuxedo that I knew cost more than my first car. He was holding a glass of champagne, laughing at a joke made by a city councilman looking every inch the successful heir he pretended to be. Harper was clinging to his arm, dressed in a shimmering silver gown that clung to her body like a second skin. She threw her head back, exposing her long neck, radiating the confidence of a woman who believed she had already won the lottery. And there were my parents, Calvin and Patricia, circling the room like sharks in expensive polyester. I watched my mother place a hand on the arm of a wealthy donor, nodding sympathetically, playing the role of the devoted daughter to the hilt. They were selling a fantasy. They were selling the idea of the Washington legacy, a legacy they had spent the last 5 years quietly dismantling for spare parts. But the centerpiece of their performance sat in a high-backed wheelchair near the stage. Nana Rose. She was putting on the performance of a lifetime. Her usually sharp posture was slumped. A thick woolen blanket was draped over her legs, and her hands, usually so expressive, lay still in her lap. She looked frail. She looked like a woman whose fire had finally burned down to embers. Every few minutes, Harper would lean down and smooth Nana Rose's hair or adjust her blanket, looking around to make sure a photographer captured the moment of tenderness. It was grotesque. It was a vulture grooming its prey before the final strike. I saw Andre lean down and whisper something to Nana Rose. She nodded weakly, not looking up. Andre straightened, a smirk playing on his lips. He thought she was broken. He thought she was signing over her power in her mind already. He had no idea that beneath that blanket her hands were likely clenched into fists, waiting for the signal. I stepped back from the doors and looked at the security guard standing next to me. He was a large man with a stoic face holding a clipboard with the guest list. He looked at my dress, then at my face. He didn't ask for my name. The dress Madame Leola had created was not something you questioned. It was armor made of silk crepe and structural boning. The deep blood-red color seemed to absorb the light around it. "It is time," I said to him. He nodded and reached for the handles of the double doors. "Open them," I commanded. The doors swung open with a heavy, expensive swoosh. The sounds of the party, the clinking glasses, the string quartet playing Mozart, rushed out to meet me. I stepped into the threshold and stopped. For a moment, nobody noticed. The party churned on a sea of black tuxedos and pastel gowns. But then the people nearest the door turned. The conversation in that corner died instantly. Then the silence spread. It moved like a wave across the room, row by row, as heads turned to look at the woman standing in the doorway framed by the golden light of the corridor. I walked forward. I didn't rush. I moved with the slow, deliberate cadence of a funeral march. The train of my red dress glided over the marble floor, a river of blood trailing behind me. The slit in the skirt revealed my legs with every step strong and steady. I kept my chin high, my eyes locked on the group in the center of the room. The crowd parted for me. They didn't know who I was, but they knew they should move. I saw whispers behind hands. I saw eyes widen. I was an anomaly, a disruption in their perfectly curated evening. Then Harper saw me. She was in the middle of a toast with a real estate developer when her eyes caught the movement. She froze, her glass halfway to her mouth. The color drained from her face so fast it looked like a physical blow. She blinked once, twice, as if trying to clear a hallucination. She grabbed Andre's arm, her nails digging into his suit jacket. Andre turned annoyed, until he followed her gaze. The glass of champagne slipped from his fingers. It hit the floor with a shatter that echoed in the sudden silence of the room, splashing expensive wine onto his polished shoes. He didn't even look down. He stared at me with his mouth slightly open, his eyes bulging. He looked like he was seeing a ghost. My parents turned next. My mother let out a small, strangled squeak and clutched my father's lapel. They looked at each other, panic flaring in their eyes. This wasn't part of the script. The scapegoat was supposed to be hiding in a shelter, ashamed and defeated. The scapegoat was not supposed to be walking through the Ritz-Carlton looking like a vengeful goddess. I stopped 10 feet away from them. The silence in the ballroom was absolute now. Even the string quartet had trailed off, the cellist resting his bow uncertainly. Harper was the first to recover. Her shock morphed instantly into defensive rage. She couldn't let this happen. This was her night. She was the queen of the ball, and I was the dirt on her shoe that refused to be scraped off. She marched toward me, her silver dress rustling aggressively. She stopped a few feet away, her face twisted in a snarl that she tried to hide from the guests behind a fake tight smile. "What do you think you are doing?" she hissed, her voice low and trembling with fury. "You are not supposed to be here. Look at you. You look ridiculous." I looked down at her. In her silver sequins, she looked cheap. She looked like tinsel trying to be a diamond. "I am here to wish my grandmother a happy birthday." "Harper," I said, my voice carrying clearly in the quiet room. "Is that a problem?" "Yes, it is a problem," Harper spat. "You are not on the list. You are trespassing. And I will not let you ruin this night with your drama and your begging." She turned around and waved frantically at a large man in a black suit standing near the stage. "Security," she screamed, her voice cracking, abandoning all pretense of poise. "Security, get her out of here. This woman is crashing the party. She is unstable. Remove her immediately." The security guard started to move toward us, his hand reaching for his radio. My parents stepped forward, finding their courage now that Harper had taken the lead. "Please, Sophia," my father said, his voice loud enough for the donors to hear. "Don't make a scene. We will give you some money outside. Just go. You need help." "You are embarrassing the family," my mother added, wiping a fake tear from her eye. "We love you, but we cannot have you acting out like this in public." The guests began to murmur. I could hear the words unstable and crashing, rippling through the crowd. Harper smiled triumphantly. She had done it. She had spun the narrative. I was the crazy intruder, and she was the victim protecting the family honor. The security guard reached me. He placed a heavy hand on my arm. "Ma'am, you need to come with me," he said sternly. I didn't move. I didn't pull away. I just looked past him, past Harper's smug face, past my parents' fake sorrow, directly at the wheelchair on the edge of the dance floor. Nana Rose had lifted her head. The blanket had slipped from her lap. The frail, confused old woman was gone. In her place sat the matriarch of the Washington Empire, her eyes sharp as diamonds. She reached for the microphone stand that had been set up for the speeches. Her hand was steady. She pulled the mic down to her level. The feedback whine made everyone wince. "Let her go!" Nana Rose's voice boomed through the speakers, deep and commanding. The security guard froze. Harper spun around, confused. "Grandma, it is okay," Harper said, her voice shaking. "We are handling it. Sophia is just having one of her episodes. We are protecting you. I said let her go." Nana Rose repeated each word, landing like a hammer strike. She gripped the armrests of her wheelchair. Slowly, painfully, but with immense dignity, she pushed herself up. Gasps ripple through the room. Andre took a step forward, his hands raised. "Nana, sit down." "You are too weak," he cried out, panic rising in his voice. Nana Rose ignored him. She stood to her full height, leaning slightly on the podium, but standing on her own 2 feet. She looked at the security guard, who was still holding my arm. Unhand her, Nana Rose ordered. That woman is not a trespasser. She looked at me, and for the first time in months, she smiled. It was a smile of pride, a smile of war. She is my granddaughter, Nana Rose announced, her voice ringing out to the back of the ballroom. She is the only person in this room who actually belongs here. Let her in. She is my guest of honor. The security guard released me instantly and stepped back, bowing his head. Harper stood frozen, her mouth agape, her narrative shattering in real time. Andre looked like he was about to vomit. I smiled at Harper. It was a small, cold smile. I told you, Harper, I whispered as I walked past her toward the stage. I am not here to beg. I walked up the steps to the stage and took my place next to Nana Rose. She took my hand, her grip strong and warm. We stood there, two women in red and gold against a sea of black and silver, facing a room full of people who had just realized that the play they were watching had a very different ending than the one printed in the program. My parents looked at each other with terror. They knew. In that moment, looking at us standing together, they knew the game was over. But they had no idea that the execution had just begun. The silence that followed Nana Rose's declaration was heavy, thick with unspoken questions, but my brother Andre was a master of filling silence with noise. He saw his narrative fracturing, saw the confusion on the faces of the donors and the city officials, and he did what he always did. He put on a show. He stepped forward, placing a gentle, condescending hand on Nana Rose's shoulder, acting as if her command to let me in was nothing more than the rambling of a confused elderly woman that he was graciously indulging. Thank you, Nana, Andre said, his voice smooth as silk, projected perfectly into the microphone. We are all just so happy that Sophia could make it despite her personal struggles. Family is about forgiveness after all. He gestured to the waiters to bring chairs, turning the stage into a living room, positioning himself at the center while leaving me on the periphery. He adjusted his cufflinks, took a deep breath, and looked out at the sea of faces. The transformation was instant. His posture softened, his eyes glistened with unshed tears, and his voice dropped to a register of deep, reverent emotion. He was channeling Grandpa Arthur, or at least a cheap imitation of him. Tonight is not just about celebrating 75 years of this incredible woman, Andre began, placing a hand over his heart. It is about legacy. It is about the heavy, beautiful burden of carrying a name that means so much to this city. He paused for effect, wiping a single perfectly timed tear from his cheek. When Grandpa Arthur passed, I made a promise. I promised that I would protect what he built. I promised that I would take care of Nana Rose, whose health, as many of you know, has been fragile lately. It has not been easy. There have been sleepless nights. There have been sacrifices. Harper and I have put our own lives on hold, pouring our time and our resources into restoring the family estate on Hawthorne Street, ensuring that Nana has a sanctuary worthy of her. I stood just a few feet away watching him lie. My blood ran cold, not with anger, but with a terrifying clarity. He truly believed it. He had repeated the lie so many times that in his mind, he really was the savior. He had convinced himself that stealing my house and burning my grandfather's books was an act of preservation. Harper stood next to him, beaming, clutching her silver clutch like it was an Oscar. She looked at the audience with wide, adoring eyes, playing the role of the supportive partner who stood by her man through the hardships of inheriting millions. But words are cheap. Andre continued, his voice swelling with passion. And the Washington legacy has always been about action, about giving back. That is why, in honor of Nana Rose's birthday, Harper and I wanted to do something special. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a check. It wasn't just a slip of paper, it was a prop. He held it up so the light caught the signature. We know how much Nana loves the Southside Youth Center, Andre announced. So tonight, Harper and I are donating $20,000 to the center's building fund. A gasp went through the room, followed by thunderous applause. This money comes directly from the profits of our real estate ventures. Andre shouted over the clapping, smiling modestly. It is our way of saying that the next generation is ready to lead. We are ready to serve. The applause grew louder. People were standing up. They were cheering for the thief. They were cheering for the man who was planning to sell his grandfather's home to a loan shark to save his own kneecaps. They saw a philanthropist. I saw a man frantically trying to buy respectability with money he didn't have. I looked over at my parents. They were standing in the front row, clapping so hard their hands must have stung. My mother turned to look at me. Her expression was triumphant. Her eyes bored into mine, communicating a message that didn't need words. See, her eyes said, "This is why we chose him. This is success. This is power. You could never do this. You are just a spectator in his world." My father gave me a pitying look, a slight shake of his head, as if to say, "Don't you wish you were more like your brother?" They thought they had won. They thought this gesture, this grand public display of generosity, would cement Andre's position as the head of the family. They thought I would shrink away ashamed of my poverty in the face of his wealth. But they had forgotten one thing. I knew where the money came from. I knew about the Airbnb account. I knew about the forged trust fund checks. I knew about the loan shark. That $20,000 wasn't profit. It was crime scene evidence. Nana Rose sat in her wheelchair, her face impassive, but I felt her hand brush against mine. A light squeeze. Now her touch said. The applause began to die down. Andre was basking in the glow, reaching for Harper's hand to raise it in victory. He reached for the microphone again, likely to make a toast to himself. But I was faster. I stepped forward. The movement was sharp, cutting through the celebratory atmosphere. The red silk of my dress caught the stage lights, turning me into a flame against the black backdrop. I didn't ask for permission. I didn't wait for a pause. I walked straight up to Andre. He looked at me annoyed, expecting me to hug him, or offer a congratulatory word that he could magnanimously accept. He smiled a tight warning smile that said, "Back off." I reached out and took the microphone from his hand. He was so surprised that he let go without a fight. The feedback whine screeched again, silencing the last few clappers. I stood center stage, the heavy metal of the microphone cool in my hand. I looked at the audience, at the senators and the CEOs, and then I looked at my parents, whose triumphant smiles were starting to falter. Finally, I turned to Andre. "That is a very generous gift, Andre," I said, my voice calm, steady, and amplified to every corner of the ballroom. $20,000 is a lot of money. It can change a lot of lives. Andre nodded, trying to regain control. "Thank you, Sophia. We just wanted to—" But I interrupted, my voice sharpening like a blade. "You forgot to tell them something, brother. You told them the money came from your business profits, but you forgot to tell them exactly which business that is." Andre's smile froze. A flicker of genuine fear darted behind his eyes. "You forgot to tell them where that money really came from." I continued, taking a step closer to him. I looked out at the audience, my eyes locking with the camera crew at the back of the room. "And since my brother is too modest to say it, I think I should tell you all the truth about the Washington family business." The audio-visual technician in the control booth at the back of the room hesitated. He was looking down at his console, then up at Andre, then over to me. He had been paid by my parents to run a slideshow of flattering family photos, a montage of lies set to sentimental music. He wasn't expecting a hijacking. But then he looked at Nana Rose. She didn't turn around. She simply raised her right hand and gave a sharp, decisive nod. It was a command from the woman who signed his paychecks. The technician's loyalty shifted in a heartbeat. He cut the feed to the projector, plunging the massive screen behind us into a waiting darkness. I pulled the HDMI cable from the podium's connectivity port, the one Andre had been using to display the logo of his fake charity foundation. My hands were steady. I felt a strange sense of calm, the kind that comes when you step off a ledge and realize you can fly. I plugged my phone in. The screen flickered. A loading icon spun for a heartbreaking second, the only sound in the room being the hum of the projector fan, and the shallow, panicked breathing of my brother standing just 2 feet away. Then the image snapped into focus. It was 12 feet tall and crystal clear. It was not a picture of smiling children or a renovated kitchen. It was a high-resolution scan of a legal document. The header was unmistakable. Cook County Recorder of Deeds. Certificate of Title. You told everyone here that you own the property on Hawthorne Street, I said, my voice echoing through the silent ballroom. You told them you were pouring your own money into a family asset. You accepted praise for your generosity. You accepted applause for your sacrifice. I turned to look at the screen, forcing the entire room to follow my gaze. But there is just one problem with that story, Andre. You cannot renovate a house you do not own. And you certainly cannot donate profits from a property that does not belong to you. I pointed to the line in the center of the document where the owner's name was printed in bold, uncompromising black letters. Sophia Washington. The murmur that went through the crowd started low like distant thunder. I saw the city councilman in the front row squint, then put on his glasses. I saw the whispers start between the wives of the donors. They were reading the date. The deed was not old. It had been reaffirmed 6 months ago, right before I was supposedly kicked out for being unstable. This house was left to me by our grandfather. I continued, turning back to face my brother. He left it to me because he knew I would protect it. He knew I would never treat it as a piggy bank for gambling debts or a stage for vanity projects. You are not the owner, Andre. You are a squatter. You and Harper have been living in my home, destroying my property, and profiting from my inheritance while I slept in a shelter with my 4-year-old daughter. Andre's face had gone a color I had never seen before, a sickly gray that clashed violently with his expensive tuxedo. He opened his mouth to speak, to spin another lie, to claim it was a mistake or a forgery, but I didn't give him the chance. I swiped the screen on my phone. The image changed. The collective gasp that sucked the air out of the room was immediate and visceral. This was not a document. This was a video. It was the footage from the hidden camera in the living room, time-stamped just 2 days ago. On the screen, Harper was standing in front of the marble fireplace. She looked beautiful and manicured, holding a glass of wine. But it was what she was doing that made the wealthy, cultured audience recoil in horror. She was holding a leather-bound book. Even on the screen, the gold lettering was visible. The Count of Monte Cristo. It was an antique, a piece of history. In the video, Harper laughed. It was a cruel, dismissive sound that cut through the ballroom speakers. She tossed the book into the roaring fire. The camera zoomed in as the pages curled and blackened, the leather cover bubbling in the heat. That book, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that was louder than a scream, was a first edition. It was a gift from our grandfather. It was the book he used to teach me how to read. It was the most valuable thing I owned, not because of the money, but because of the love it represented. I looked at Harper. She was standing frozen near the edge of the stage, her hands covering her mouth, her eyes wide with terror. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the audience. She was watching her carefully crafted persona of the sophisticated, benevolent heiress incinerate along with that book. She saw the disgust on the faces of the women she had been trying to impress just minutes ago. You burned it for a photo op, Harper, I said. You burned my history because you thought it ruined your aesthetic. You thought nobody was watching. You thought the cameras were dead. But Grandpa Arthur never stopped watching. I swiped the screen again. This is the end, I thought. This is the nail in the coffin. The third image appeared. It was a screenshot of a text message conversation. The interface was dark mode, the green bubbles glowing ominously on the giant screen. The sender was listed as Andre. The recipient was labeled simply as Tony. I let the silence stretch for 5 seconds. I wanted them to read it. I wanted them to absorb every word. The text read, "Do not worry about the deadline. The old lady is on her last legs. She is going to kick the bucket any day now. As soon as she dies, I am selling the house. I will have your cash. Just keep your guys away from me." The room erupted. It wasn't polite murmurs anymore. It was an explosion of shock and outrage. Chairs scraped against the floor as people stood up to get a better look. Someone in the back shouted, "Oh my God." A woman in the front row covered her mouth and turned away from Andre as if he were contagious. Andre wasn't moving. He was staring at the screen, his eyes hollow. He looked like a man who had been stripped naked in the middle of a blizzard. The text message hung over him like a guillotine blade. It revealed everything: the lack of love, the predation, the fact that he was waiting for our grandmother, the woman sitting right there in the wheelchair, to die so he could pay off a loan shark. I turned to the audience. "You applauded him," I said, my voice shaking with the force of my anger. "You applauded a man who is betting on the death of his own grandmother. You clapped for a man who calls the matriarch of this family the old lady who is about to kick the bucket." I walked over to Andre. He shrank back, terrified of me. "You are not a builder, Andre. You are a vulture. You have been circling her, waiting for her to fall so you could pick the meat off her bones, but you forgot one thing." I pointed to Nana Rose, who was watching him with a look of absolute crushing disappointment. "She is not dying, Andre. She was testing you, and you failed." That was the breaking point. The reality of his destruction hit him all at once. The donors were turning their backs. The investors were pulling out their phones, likely canceling checks. His reputation was dead. But it was Harper who snapped. The humiliation was too much for her. The exposure of her cruelty, the loss of her social standing, the realization that the fortune she thought she married was actually a mountain of debt and lies. She let out a primal scream, a sound of pure, unadulterated rage. "You bitch!" Harper shrieked, her face twisting into a mask of ugliness that no amount of makeup could hide. She lunged at me. She moved fast, her silver dress blurring as she crossed the stage. Her hands were clawed, reaching for the microphone, reaching for my face, reaching for anything she could destroy. I didn't flinch. I didn't step back. I stood my ground, watching her come. But she never reached me. A massive hand clamped down on her arm. It was the head of security, the same man Nana Rose had ordered to let me in. He spun Harper around with professional ease, pinning her arms behind her back. "Get off me!" Harper screamed, kicking and thrashing, her elegant composure completely gone. "Do you know who I am? I am Mrs. Washington. This is my party." "Not anymore, ma'am," the guard said, his voice calm and bored. I looked at her, struggling in the guard's grip, her hair wild, her dress twisted. She looked pathetic. I lifted the microphone one last time. "You are right, Harper," I said. "You are Mrs. Washington. But looking at the text messages on the screen and the debts your husband owes, I don't think that name is going to open any more doors for you. In fact, I think it is about to close a heavy steel one behind you." I signaled to the technician to cut the feed. The screen went black, leaving the image of their crimes burned into the retinas of everyone in the room. I handed the microphone back to the stand. I didn't need to say anything else. The house was mine. The truth was out. And the silence in the room was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. The room was suspended in a vacuum of shock. The image of Harper burning my grandfather's book had faded to black, but the after image was seared into the minds of every person in the Ritz-Carlton ballroom. My brother Andre stood center stage, his mouth opening and closing like a fish pulled from water, unable to find a lie big enough to cover the naked truth of his greed. Harper was still struggling in the grip of the security guard, her face a ruin of mascara and panic. But we were not done. I had exposed their character, but now it was time to expose their crimes. I looked toward the side entrance near the stage. The heavy doors opened and Malik walked in. He did not look like a friend from law school tonight. He looked like the hand of judgment. He was flanked by two federal agents in dark suits, their badges catching the light of the chandeliers. Malik carried a thick leather briefcase, and the sound of his footsteps on the hardwood floor was the only sound in the cavernous room. He walked up the stairs to the stage, bypassing my parents, who were huddled together in the front row, looking small and terrified. Malik stood next to me, placing his briefcase on the podium. He didn't smile. He opened the case and pulled out a stack of documents bound in blue legal covers. "Ladies and gentlemen," Malik said, his voice deep and resonant, projecting without the need for a microphone. "My name is Malik Johnson, and I am the attorney representing the estate of Sophia Washington and the Washington Family Trust." He picked up the first document and turned to Andre. "Andre Washington, you are hereby served with a federal indictment for 18 counts of wire fraud, embezzlement, and forgery." Malik slapped the document onto Andre's chest. Andre was too stunned to catch it, and the papers fluttered to the floor, scattering around his expensive shoes. "We have forensic evidence proving that you, along with your parents, Calvin and Patricia Washington, conspired to forge Sophia Washington's signature on legal trust documents 4 years ago. You used these forged documents to illegally access and drain over $500,000 from a protected trust fund money that was designated for the beneficiary's education and housing." A gasp ripped through the audience. My parents shrank back, my mother clutching her pearls as if they could strangle the truth coming out. "That is a lie," my father shouted, his voice cracking. "We were managing it. We were protecting the family assets." Malik turned to them, his expression unyielding. "Managing it by paying off gambling debts?" Malik asked, holding up another document. "We have the bank records, Mr. Washington. We have the transfers from the trust account directly to offshore gaming sites. We have the withdrawals made at casinos in Vegas and Atlantic City. And we have the witness testimony of the notary you bribed to stamp the forged signature." My mother let out a sob and collapsed into a chair, burying her face in her hands. The facade of the respectable church-going family was gone. They were thieves who had stolen from their own daughter to feed their son's addiction. Malik then turned his attention to Harper. She had stopped struggling, her eyes fixed on the federal agents waiting at the bottom of the stairs. "And Mrs. Harper Washington," Malik said, his voice turning colder, "you are not being indicted for the trust fund. Your crimes are far more personal." He held up a thick file. "This is a subpoena from the Internal Revenue Service. Our investigation uncovered that you have failed to report over $100,000 in rental income generated from a property you do not own. Tax evasion is a serious felony, Mrs. Washington. But that is not all." He took a step closer to her. "We also found the student loan application you filed 6 months ago. The one where you used Sophia Washington's Social Security number to take out $20,000, which you then diverted to a private account to pay for your cosmetic surgery and designer wardrobe." The room went deadly silent. Tax evasion was one thing, but identity theft was a crime of malice. It was a crime of ugliness. Harper shook her head frantically, her blonde hair whipping around her face. "No!" she screamed, her voice shrill and desperate. "That was a mistake. I didn't mean to. Andre made me do it. He told me it was okay. He told me she wouldn't notice because she was homeless." The confession hung in the air. She had just admitted that she knew I was homeless, and instead of helping, she had decided to rob me. She had decided to kick me while I was down. The federal agents moved forward. One of them stepped onto the stage and took Harper's arm, pulling her away from the security guard. He produced a pair of handcuffs. The metallic click as they locked around her wrists echoed through the room like a gunshot. "You cannot do this," Harper wailed as they began to lead her away. "I am a Washington. I live on Hawthorne Street. This is my party." "You are not a Washington!" a voice boomed from behind us. Everyone turned. Nana rose. For the last hour, she had sat in her wheelchair playing the part of the frail, dying matriarch. But now she gripped the armrests. The blanket that had covered her legs slid to the floor. Nana, Andre whispered, reaching out a trembling hand. "Don't get up. You are weak." "I am not weak," Nana Rose said, her voice dripping with disdain. "I was waiting." She pushed herself up. Her legs were steady. Her back was straight. She stood to her full height, towering over the ruins of her family. She did not look like a woman on her deathbed. She looked like a queen who had just returned from war. She walked to the microphone, her steps firm and sure. She looked at Andre, then at my parents, and finally at the empty spot where Harper had just been dragged away. I built this family from nothing, Nana Rose said, addressing the room. I scrubbed floors. I worked double shifts. I saved every penny so that my children and grandchildren would never know the hunger I knew. I gave you everything. And how did you repay me? She pointed a shaking finger at Andre. You waited for me to die. You bet on the date of my death like it was a horse race. You stole from your sister. You destroyed your grandfather's books. You defiled the house he built with his own hands. She turned to my parents. And you allowed it. You watched your daughter suffer. You watched her sleep in a shelter. And you did nothing because you were too busy spending the money you stole from her. You valued your country club membership more than your own flesh and blood. She took a deep breath. And when she spoke again, her voice was the final gavel strike. Effective immediately, I am activating the disinheritance clause in the Washington Family Trust. My father stood up, panic etched on his face. Mom, you cannot do that. The clause only applies to... It applies to any family member who engages in criminal activity or fraud against the estate, Nana Rose interrupted. And thanks to Sophia and her lawyer, we have proof of both. She looked at them with eyes that were dry and hard. You are all cut off. The stipends, the housing allowances, the club memberships. It is all gone. The house on Hawthorne Street belongs to Sophia. The trust fund will be replenished by liquidating your personal assets. You will leave this room with nothing but the clothes on your backs. Andre fell to his knees. It wasn't a gesture of repentance. It was the collapse of a man who realized his life was over. Nana, please, he begged, tears streaming down his face. I have debts, dangerous debts. If you cut me off, Tony will... I do not care about Tony, Nana Rose said coldly. You made your bed, Andre. Now you can sleep in it. Or perhaps the federal government will provide a bed for you. She turned her back on him. She walked over to me and took my hand. Let's go, Sophia, she said. The air in here is stale. We walked off the stage together, the woman in the red dress and the matriarch in gold. Behind us, chaos erupted. My mother was screaming at my father. Andre was sobbing on the floor. The federal agents were reading him his rights. As we reached the double doors, I looked back one last time. Harper was being shoved into the back of a police car outside the window. She looked up and saw me. For a second, our eyes met. There was no arrogance left in her, no smug superiority, just the terrifying realization that she had played a game she didn't understand, and she had lost everything. She had lost the house, she had lost the money, she had lost her freedom. And me. I gripped Nana Rose's hand tighter. I had my name back, I had my home back, and most importantly, I had the truth. We walked out into the cool night air, leaving the wreckage of the fake Washington dynasty behind us. The war was over. And as I looked up at the stars above Chicago, I knew that for the first time in a long time, the future was wide open. The heavy glass doors of the Ritz-Carlton swung shut behind us, cutting off the murmurs of the stunned crowd. But the silence I expected to find outside was shattered by the chaotic symphony of justice. The night air was no longer still. It was pulsing with the rhythm of red and blue emergency lights that bounced off the polished hoods of the luxury cars waiting in the valet line. It was a scene that belonged in a crime drama, not at a 75th birthday gala for one of Chicago's most respected families. But as I watched the tragedy unfold, I realized that my family had been a crime drama for a long time. We just hadn't seen the ending until now. Federal agents stood by a line of black SUVs, their faces impassive, waiting for the people who had walked into the party, as royalty, to walk out as prisoners. Harper was the first to break the surreal tension. She had been led out by the security team, but when she saw the police cars, the reality of her situation finally pierced through her delusion. She stopped fighting the guard and turned her feral gaze onto my brother Andre, who was being escorted out a few steps behind her, looking like a man walking to the gallows. "You did this!" Harper screamed, her voice shredding the night air. She lunged at him, her fingernails, usually so perfectly manicured, now looking like claws, as she raked them across the lapel of his tuxedo. The security guard had to tighten his grip to keep her from tearing Andre's face apart. "You told me the house was yours!" Harper shrieked, her body convulsing with rage. "You told me the trust fund was a loophole. You told me we were safe." Andre tried to back away, putting his hands up in a pathetic gesture of defense. "Harper, please calm down. We can fix this. I can call Tony. Tony is going to kill you," Harper yelled, cutting him off with a brutal truth that made Andre flinch. "And I am not going to prison for a broke loser who lies to his wife. I am not going down for your gambling debts, Andre. I want a lawyer. I want a divorce. I want to talk to the agents right now." She twisted her body toward the nearest federal agent, desperation pouring off her in waves. "I will talk," she shouted at the officer. "I will tell you everything. I will tell you about the offshore accounts. I will tell you about the fake contractors. It was all him. He made me sign those papers. He forced me. The betrayal was absolute." The couple that had stood on stage 20 minutes ago holding hands and presenting themselves as the future of the Washington legacy was now tearing each other apart like starving wolves. Andre stared at her, his jaw slack, finally realizing that the woman he had stolen everything for had never loved him. She had loved the lifestyle he stole to give her. And now that the lifestyle was gone, so was she. While the younger generation imploded, the older generation was trying a different tactic. My parents, Calvin and Patricia, had followed us out. They weren't in handcuffs yet, but they looked small and shrunken in the harsh glare of the police lights. When they saw Nana Rose standing by the curb, looking like a statue of judgment in her gold dress, they rushed toward her. My father fell to his knees first. It was a shocking sight. This was a man who had always carried himself with an air of unearned superiority, a man who lectured me about responsibility while stealing my money. Now he was kneeling on the dirty pavement of a parking lot, ruining his suit pants. "Mama, please," my father pleaded, reaching out to touch the hem of Nana Rose's dress. "You have to stop this. Tell the officers it was a misunderstanding. Tell them we have permission." My mother dropped down beside him, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. Her weeping sounded loud and theatrical, the same way she used to cry when she wanted to manipulate me into doing her chores. "We were only borrowing it, Mama," she sobbed, grasping at the air near Nana Rose's hand. "We were going to put it back. We just needed to help Andre get on his feet. He is your grandson. He is the only boy. You cannot let them take him away. We did it for the family." Nana Rose looked down at them. She didn't step back, but she didn't reach out to comfort them either. Her face was unreadable, illuminated by the flashing red lights that painted us all in the colors of emergency. "For the family," Nana Rose repeated, her voice low and dangerous. She looked at my mother, her eyes narrowing. "You say you did it for the family. But Sophia is family. Zuri is family." My mother flinched at the mention of my daughter's name. "We didn't mean to hurt them," my mother stammered. "We just thought Sophia could handle it. She is strong. She is used to struggling. We thought—" "You thought she didn't matter?" Nana Rose interrupted, her voice rising over the sound of the police radios. "You thought that because she doesn't wear designer clothes or drive a luxury car, she was disposable." Nana Rose took a step closer to her kneeling son and daughter-in-law. "You let my great-granddaughter sleep in a shelter," she said, each word hitting them like a physical blow. "You knew exactly where they were. You knew a 4-year-old child was standing in line for soup in the middle of winter. And you sat in your warm house drinking wine bought with her mother's money, and you did nothing." She leaned down, bringing her face close to my father's. "That is not borrowing, Calvin. That is evil. I raised you to be a man, but somewhere along the way you became a monster who eats his own young." My father put his head in his hands and wept, a sound of pure shame. "There is no forgiveness for this," Nana Rose said, straightening up and looking at the federal agents. "Not in this life. You broke the most sacred law of this family. You protect the children. You failed. And now you will pay the price." She nodded to the lead agent. "Officer," she said clearly, "they are all yours." The agent moved forward. He pulled Andre's hands behind his back. The sound of the metal handcuffs ratcheting tight was the final period at the end of a long, painful sentence. Andre didn't fight. He was broken. He looked at me one last time as they shoved him toward the patrol car. His eyes were empty, the eyes of a man who had gambled his soul and lost. Harper, on the other hand, was still screaming as they cuffed her. "This is a mistake," she wailed as they pushed her head down to get her into the back seat. "My jacket is Chanel. You are ruining the silk. I need my lawyer." The door slammed shut, cutting off her voice. Then it was my parents' turn. They were not handcuffed, but they were escorted to a separate car for questioning. They looked back at us as they were led away, their faces masks of disbelief. They still couldn't understand why their excuses hadn't worked. They had lived in a bubble of entitlement for so long that they thought consequences were things that happened to other people. I stood there in the cold wind watching the convoy of police cars pull away, their lights fading into the Chicago traffic. The valet parking attendants were staring, their mouths open. The guests who had trickled out of the hotel were whispering behind their hands. The Washington family scandal would be the talk of the city for months. The newspapers would run headlines about the fraud, the arrests, the fall of a dynasty. But I didn't care about the headlines. I looked at the empty parking space where the police cars had been, the space where my tormentors had stood just moments ago. They were gone. The fear of running into them at the grocery store was gone. The fear of Andre calling Child Protective Services was gone. The fear of seeing Harper living my life in my house was gone. I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned to see Nana Rose. She looked tired, her shoulders slumping slightly now that the adrenaline was fading, but her eyes were still bright. "Are you okay, child?" she asked softly. I looked at the hotel, then at the sky, then at her. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the crisp, cold air. It didn't smell like fear anymore. It smelled like freedom. "I am better than okay, Nana," I said, a genuine smile spreading across my face. "I am free." Nana Rose nodded. "Yes, you are. And tomorrow, we have a lot of work to do. We have a garden to replant, and I believe you have a house to move back into." Mr. Henderson pulled the Lincoln Town Car up to the curb. He opened the back door for us, his face solemn but respectful. "Home, Miss Sophia?" he asked. I looked at the car, then back at the spot where the police had taken my family away. "Yes, Mr. Henderson," I said, sliding into the warm leather seat. "Take us home, to 42 Hawthorne Street." As the car pulled away, I rested my head on Nana Rose's shoulder. The nightmare was over. The morning would bring lawyers and press releases, and the hard work of rebuilding a life. But for tonight, there was only the quiet hum of the engine and the knowledge that the people who had tried to break me had only succeeded in making me unbreakable. The house was waiting. My daughter was safe. And the Washington legacy was finally in the hands of someone who knew what it truly meant. The winter wind that used to cut through my coat like a knife had finally given way to the gentle caress of a Chicago spring. 6 months ago, I was standing in a line for soup, shivering and hiding my face, terrified of the future. Today, I stood on the back porch of 42 Hawthorne Street, holding a warm cup of jasmine tea, watching the morning sunlight filter through the new leaves of the oak trees. The air smelled of damp earth and blooming lilacs, a scent that felt like a promise kept. The house behind me no longer felt like a stranger's showroom. The sterile gray walls that Harper had loved so much were gone, replaced by warm terracottas and deep, calming blues. I had spent the last few months stripping away every trace of their vanity. The marble floors that were too cold for a child to play on were covered in soft woven rugs. The fireplace, once the site of my family's cruelty, was now the heart of the home, its mantel lined with framed photos of Zuri and Grandpa Arthur. And right in the center, in a place of honor, sat a new leather-bound copy of The Count of Monte Cristo. It wasn't the original, but it meant just as much because inside the cover, Nana Rose had written to Sophia, who wrote her own ending. I took a sip of tea and looked out at the garden. This was my favorite part of the restoration. The mud pit where Harper had tried to dig her infinity pool was gone. The scars in the earth had been healed. I had spent weeks on my hands and knees working the soil, mixing in compost and replanting the roses. They were small now, just tender green shoots and tight buds waiting to open, but they were strong. They had deep roots, just like us. Zuri was running through the grass, her laughter ringing out like a bell. She was chasing a yellow butterfly, her hair bouncing in braids that I had taken the time to style this morning without rushing, without fear, without the looming threat of eviction. She stopped by the rose bushes and crouched down, whispering to them, just like Grandpa used to do. "Grow big," she told the flowers. "Mommy said you are safe now." A lump formed in my throat. We were safe now. The words still felt new, like a coat I was breaking in, but it was starting to fit. The silence of the house was peaceful, but it wasn't empty. The ghosts of Andre and Harper had been exorcised by the gavel of a federal judge. The justice system had moved with a speed that surprised even Malik. The evidence I had gathered, combined with the forensic accounting records, had been irrefutable. Andre and Harper were currently residing in separate federal facilities, beginning sentences that would keep them away for at least 5 years. I heard through the grapevine that the divorce papers were filed within a week of their arrest. Their love, built on a foundation of greed and shared delusion, had crumbled the moment the money ran out. Harper was claiming she was a victim of coercion, trying to sell her story to anyone who would listen. Andre was claiming he was an addict who needed treatment, not prison. They were still blaming each other, still trying to climb over one another to get a breath of air. I didn't visit them. I didn't write to them. I didn't hate them anymore, because hate requires energy, and I had none left to give them. They were just shadows, now fading memories of a long, hard winter. As for my parents, justice had taken a form that felt almost poetic. Nana Rose had been true to her word. She had liquidated their personal assets to replenish the trust fund they had drained. They had been forced to sell their house, the one with the manicured lawn and the facade of perfection that they had valued more than their own daughter. It wasn't enough to cover everything, but it was a start. Last I heard, Calvin and Patricia were renting a small 2-bedroom apartment on the edge of the city, in a neighborhood they used to make fun of when we drove past it. My mother was working part-time as a receptionist at a dental office. My father was driving for a rideshare service. They were living the life they had tried to condemn me to. My mother had sent me a letter last month. It wasn't an apology. It was a list of complaints. She said the heating bill was high. She said the neighbors were loud. She asked if I could spare a few $100s for old times' sake. I didn't reply. I burned the letter in the fireplace, watching the smoke rise up the chimney, carrying away the last of my guilt. I realized then that I wasn't responsible for their comfort. I was only responsible for my own peace. The sliding glass door opened behind me, and the rhythmic tap of a cane announced Nana Rose's arrival. She stepped out onto the porch, looking younger than she had in years. The weight of the deception had been lifted off her shoulders, and she moved with a lightness I hadn't seen since Grandpa died. She was wearing a simple cardigan and holding a plate of biscuits. "It is a good day for the garden," she said softly, sitting down in one of the wicker chairs I had bought. I sat down next to her, placing my tea on the small table between us. "It is, Nana. The roses are coming back. I think we will have blooms by June." Nana Rose watched Zuri play, a small smile playing on her lips. "Arthur would have liked this," she said. "He never wanted a pool. He wanted life. He wanted dirt under fingernails and knees stained with grass." "He would have been proud of you, Nana," I said. "You saved the legacy." Nana Rose shook her head slowly. "No, child. You saved it. I just opened the door. You were the one who walked through it. You were the one who stood up when everyone else was kneeling." She reached out and took my hand. Her skin was paper thin, but her grip was strong. "I am proud of you, Sophia. Not because you got the house back, but because you didn't let them turn you into one of them. You didn't become bitter. You became strong." There is a difference. We sat there in companionable silence, listening to the birds sing and the distant hum of the city. This was what family was supposed to be. It wasn't about contracts or appearances. It wasn't about who could shout the loudest or who wore the most expensive clothes. It was about safety. It was about shared silence. It was about knowing that the person sitting next to you would never let you fall. For years, I thought I was the broken one. I thought I was the failure because I couldn't fit into their mold. I thought my refusal to play their games made me weak. But sitting there in the house that was finally truly mine, I realized that I wasn't the broken branch. I was the one who had been pruned so I could grow. They called me a destroyer. My mother told the neighbors I destroyed the family. My brother told the judge I was vindictive. But looking at the peace in my grandmother's eyes and the joy in my daughter's laughter, I know the truth. I didn't destroy the family. I cleaned it. Cleaned. I removed the rot that was eating away at the foundation. Sometimes you have to tear a house down to the studs to save it. You have to strip away the drywall and expose the mold before you can build something that will last. I stood up and walked to the edge of the porch. Zuri saw me and waved her face beaming with pure, unburdened happiness. "Mommy, look!" she yelled. "I am a flower." I laughed, a sound that came from deep in my chest. "Yes, you are, baby. You are the most beautiful flower in the garden." I looked directly at the camera in my mind, speaking to every person who has ever felt small. Every person who has ever been told they don't matter by the people who should love them the most. Do not ever confuse endurance with love. You do not have to endure abuse to prove you are loyal. You do not have to let people set you on fire just to keep them warm. Real love protects. Real love honors. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and your children is to walk away from the people who hurt you and lock the door behind you. I turned back to the house, to the warmth, to the future. The black sedan wasn't coming back. The eviction notices were gone. The cold was a memory. My name is Sophia Washington. I am a mother. I am a granddaughter. And I am the owner of the house on Hawthorne Street. My story didn't end in a shelter. It started there. And this right here is my beautiful, messy, authentic beginning. If you are watching this and you feel trapped, if you feel like the black sheep, remember this. The black sheep is often the only one telling the truth. Stay strong, keep fighting, and never let anyone take your key. Thank you for listening to my story. If this resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe. Your support helps me share more stories of truth and resilience. Until next time, take care of your garden and take care of yourself. This journey taught me that shared DNA is not a license for abuse. For years, I confused endurance with love, believing that silence was the price of belonging. But I learned that true family protects you. They don't prey on your vulnerability. Reclaiming my home wasn't just about justice. It was about defining my own worth. Walking away from toxic people, even those you share a last name with, is not an act of destruction, but of survival. I found that peace only comes when you stop trying to please those who are committed to misunderstanding you. If Sophia's fight for her dignity resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of truth and resilience. Let me know in the comments below. Have you ever had to draw a hard line to protect your peace? I'd love to hear your story.